What if the scariest horror movies of the 2000s weren't the famous ones at all? What if the real creativity lived just off to the side, buried under bad marketing, unlucky timing, or the wrong reputation? Somewhere between remakes and loud trends, a whole wave of smart, unsettling horror slipped past most audiences. These films didn't fail. They were simply ignored, and once you see what they were actually doing, you might wonder how they were ever forgotten. Number 15. They. 2002. This movie arrived quietly, disappeared quickly, and took its fear with it. And that's a shame, because they understand something basic and powerful. Childhood fear never really goes away. It just waits. The story follows a woman haunted by creatures she believed lived in the dark when she was a child. As an adult, those fears begin creeping back into her life, blurring the line between memory and reality. What makes this film work isn't spectacle, it's restraint. The creatures are rarely shown clearly, which lets your imagination do most of the work. Darkness is treated like a presence, not a background. Hallways feel longer, bedrooms feel unsafe again. The movie taps into that universal experience of lying awake as a kid, convinced something was watching from the corner of the room. The film also benefits from its early 2000s atmosphere. Everything feels slightly off. The lighting is cold, the spaces feel empty, and the pacing refuses to rush. It trusts tension instead of noise. This isn't a perfect film. Some performances are uneven, and the story stays simple, but that simplicity works in its favor. They is less about plot and more about mood. It's a reminder that fear doesn't need explanation to be effective. Sometimes it just needs darkness and time. Number 14. Below. 2002. Below takes one of the most claustrophobic settings imaginable and slowly squeezes the air out of it. Set aboard a military submarine during wartime, the film follows a crew already pushed to exhaustion when strange events begin to unfold. Sounds echo where they shouldn't, shadows linger too long, and paranoia spreads faster than logic. What makes Below stand out is how grounded it feels at first. The routines are precise, the crew dynamics feel real. Everyone is tired, tense, and operating under pressure. That realism makes the unsettling moments hit harder. When something feels off, you trust that instinct because the movie has earned it. The setting does most of the work: tight corridors, low ceilings, metal walls that trap every sound. The ocean above becomes a constant reminder that escape isn't an option. As fear builds, the film begins to ask whether the threat is external or something created by stress and guilt. This movie never relies on shock. It builds unease slowly, using silence, glances, and uncertainty. By the time things escalate, you're already locked in. Below didn't get the attention it deserved because it arrived quietly and didn't fit neatly into trends. But it remains a smart, patient horror story that proves atmosphere can be just as powerful as any big moment. Number 13. Dead End. 2003. Dead End begins like a familiar holiday drive and slowly turns it into a nightmare that won't stop looping. A family takes a shortcut on Christmas Eve and finds themselves trapped on a road that refuses to let them leave. No matter how long they drive, the scenery repeats. The tension grows, and reality begins to unravel. What makes this film effective is how ordinary it starts. The characters feel real, the conversations feel natural, the irritation, the jokes, the quiet frustrations all ring true. That normalcy makes the strange moments land harder when they arrive. The road becomes its own character. It feels endless and wrong. Time loses meaning. Each stop introduces something unsettling, but never in an over-the-top way. The film keeps its focus on dread rather than chaos. There's also an emotional weight beneath the surface. The story quietly explores grief and denial without spelling it out. That gives the ending real impact, even as it remains restrained. Dead End was easy to overlook because it's small and contained, but it understands pacing, mood, and payoff. It proves that you don't need a big budget to make something linger in the mind. Sometimes all you need is a road that refuses to let you go. Number 12. The Mothman Prophecies. 2002. This is a horror film that refuses to play by familiar rules. Instead of focusing on creatures or chaos, the Mothman Prophecies leans into uncertainty. It follows a man drawn into a series of strange events connected to sightings, voices, and predictions that don't make sense until it's too late. The film's strength is its mood. Everything feels slightly disconnected from reality. Conversations trail off. Answers raise more questions. The story doesn't rush to explain itself, and that restraint makes it unsettling. You're never quite sure what's happening, and neither is the main character. The small-town setting adds to the unease. Familiar places feel watched. Everyday routines feel exposed. The sense of being observed hangs over every scene. This movie also benefits from a serious tone. It treats fear as something psychological and creeping rather than loud. There are no easy moments of relief. The tension simmers quietly. When it was released, audiences expected something more obvious. What they got was something slower and stranger. That confusion likely hurt it at the time. But revisited now, the film feels confident and mature. It's a reminder that horror can whisper and still leave a mark. Number 11, The Others, 2001. The Others is proof that patience can be terrifying. Set in a secluded house wrapped in fog and silence, the story follows a mother and her children living by strict rules. Doors stay closed, curtains stay drawn, and something unseen may be sharing the space. The film builds tension through atmosphere rather than action. Footsteps echo, doors open on their own. Silence stretches until it feels heavy. Every detail matters, and nothing feels wasted. What really makes this movie endure is its control. The performances are restrained, the camera moves carefully. The story trusts the viewer to notice small changes. Fear grows quietly instead of bursting out. At the time, the film was respected but often overshadowed by louder releases. It didn't chase trends, it leaned into classic storytelling instead, and that's why it has aged so well. The Others feels timeless. It doesn't rely on technology or spectacle. It relies on mood, pacing, and the fear of the unknown. It's a reminder that the most effective horror doesn't shout, it waits. Number 10. Frailty, 2001. Frailty opens with a confession and never lets you feel comfortable afterward. A man walks into an office and calmly claims his family was chosen for a terrifying purpose years earlier. What follows is a story told through memory, faith, and fear, but never in the way you expect. The power of this film comes from restraint. Most of the horror happens in quiet rooms and ordinary houses. There are no flashy distractions, just conversations that grow heavier and decisions that feel impossible. The tension builds through belief rather than action. What makes Frailty stand out is how it places you inside a child's perspective. You experience confusion, fear, and loyalty all at once. The film doesn't rush judgment. It lets doubt settle in slowly. Every scene adds pressure without releasing it. Performances carry the weight here. The adults feel grounded. The children feel real. Nothing feels exaggerated. That realism makes the story unsettling long after it ends. When this movie was released, it didn't fit neatly into horror marketing. It was too thoughtful, too quiet, too patient. But revisited now, Frailty feels confident and controlled. It proves horror can live entirely in belief and still feel overwhelming. Number 9. Pulse, 2001. Pulse is not a movie that tries to scare you instantly. It wants to unsettle you slowly, like a bad thought that won't leave. The story explores loneliness in a world where technology is supposed to connect people, but instead seems to isolate them even more. What makes this film powerful is its emptiness. Rooms feel abandoned, streets feel quiet, characters drift rather than act. The fear doesn't come from danger chasing you. It comes from absence, from silence, from the feeling that something has already gone wrong. The imagery is simple but unforgettable. Shadows linger, movements feel unnatural. The movie never explains too much, and that ambiguity becomes its greatest strength. This film was misunderstood outside its original audience. Many viewers expected familiar scares. Instead, they got something reflective and heavy. That mismatch caused it to slip through the cracks. Watched now, Pulse feels ahead of its time. It understands anxiety in a connected world before most films did. It's horror that doesn't attack, it withdraws. And that quiet withdrawal stays with you. Number 8. The Skeleton Key, 2005. The Skeleton Key sneaks up on you by pretending to be simple. Set in a decaying house deep in the Louisiana wetlands, the film follows a caregiver who begins noticing strange rules and stranger behavior. Nothing feels openly threatening at first, just wrong. The setting does a lot of heavy lifting. The house feels old and tired. Hallways echo. Doors seem to hide more than they reveal. The isolation makes every moment feel heavier. What works here is patience. The story unfolds slowly, letting curiosity lead instead of fear. As pieces fall into place, the tension sharpens. The movie trusts the viewer to connect dots rather than spelling everything out. When this film was released, it was often dismissed as routine, but that reputation overlooks how carefully it builds its final act. The payoff is bold and unsettling without being loud. The Skeleton Key proves that atmosphere and structure matter. It's a reminder that some horror films are best experienced without expectations, letting the story guide you where it wants to go. Number 7. Identity, 2003. Identity begins as a mystery and slowly peels itself apart. A group of strangers becomes stranded at a remote motel during a storm. One by one, tension rises as strange events unfold. The setup feels familiar, but the execution keeps shifting. What makes this film memorable is how it plays with perspective. Information is revealed carefully. Assumptions are challenged. The story refuses to stay in one lane for long. The confined setting heightens everything. The storm traps everyone in place. Conversations feel sharper. Trust erodes quickly. Each character feels like they might matter more than they first appear. When this movie arrived, some viewers didn't know what to make of it. It blends genres and takes risks that weren't typical at the time. But that willingness to push structure is exactly why it deserves re-evaluation. Identity rewards attention. It's a puzzle that stays engaging because it's confident enough to change the rules while you're watching. That boldness makes it one of the more interesting psychological horror entries of the decade. Number 6. The Descent, 2005. The Descent wastes no time making you uncomfortable. A group of friends explores an uncharted cave system, and almost immediately, the space begins to close in. Tight tunnels, total darkness, no easy way out. What sets this film apart is how physical it feels. You don't just watch the characters struggle, you feel it. The confined spaces, the lack of light, and the constant pressure create relentless tension. The film also carries emotional weight. Grief and guilt linger beneath the surface, shaping decisions and reactions. That emotional layer deepens the fear without slowing the pace. When this movie was released, it was praised, but often lumped into trend discussions of its time. Revisiting it now reveals how carefully constructed it is. Every moment builds toward escalation. The Descent understands fear as both physical and emotional. It's intense without being excessive, focused without being simple, and it remains one of the strongest examples of how environment alone can become terrifying. Number 5. 1408, 2007. This film takes a simple idea and stretches it until it feels unbearable. A skeptical writer checks into a hotel room rumored to be haunted, expecting nothing more than a good story. What he gets instead is a space that refuses to behave like reality. What makes this movie work is isolation. Once the door closes, the room becomes its own universe. Time bends, logic slips, familiar objects turn hostile without ever moving. The fear doesn't come from surprises, it comes from being trapped inside your own thoughts. The performance at the center carries everything. You believe every shift in emotion. Confidence slowly gives way to confusion, then panic, then something quieter and more unsettling. The room doesn't rush him, it waits. When this film was released, many expected a standard haunted room story. What they got was something more psychological and exhausting. That mismatch kept it from being fully appreciated at the time. Revisited now, the film feels sharp and focused. It understands that fear doesn't need a monster. Sometimes a closed door and too much time are enough. Number 4. The Orphanage, 2007. The Orphanage is gentle on the surface and devastating underneath. It tells the story of a woman returning to her childhood home, now an abandoned orphanage, hoping to reopen it. Instead, she uncovers memories and secrets that refuse to stay buried. The film builds fear through emotion rather than tension alone. The setting feels warm and sad rather than threatening. Laughter echoes through empty rooms. Games feel innocent until they don't. What makes this movie powerful is how carefully it balances mystery and heartbreak. The story unfolds slowly, letting small details matter. Every revelation feels earned, not forced. When it first appeared, it was praised but still overshadowed by louder releases. It didn't chase trends, it trusted its story. The Orphanage lingers because it understands loss. It uses fear as a way to explore memory and regret. By the time the final moments arrive, the impact is quiet but overwhelming. This is horror that doesn't shock. It settles in and stays. Number 3. Lake Mungo, 2008. Lake Mungo feels less like a movie and more like a documentary you were never meant to see. It follows a family dealing with loss while strange details begin to surface through photos, videos, and interviews. What makes this film unsettling is how normal it feels. There are no dramatic confrontations, no loud moments, just people trying to understand something they can't fully explain. The structure is simple, but effective. Each new piece of information reframes what came before it. The fear grows quietly, almost politely. When this film was released, many viewers didn't know how to react to it. It didn't behave like traditional horror. That confusion caused it to be overlooked. Watched now, it feels deeply unsettling in a very modern way. It understands how memory, technology, and grief overlap. Lake Mungo doesn't scare you in the moment. It waits until later, when you realize how much it got under your skin. Number 2. Noroi, The Curse, 2005. This film feels like uncovering something you shouldn't. Presented as a documentary investigation, it slowly pieces together folklore, strange incidents, and recordings that don't quite make sense on their own. The strength of this movie lies in its patience. It doesn't rush to explain anything. Instead, it lets information accumulate until the picture becomes impossible to ignore. The footage feels raw and unsettling without being flashy. The story grows more disturbing as connections form. By the end, the weight of what you've seen feels heavy. When this film first reached wider audiences, it was too slow for some, too confusing for others. But that slow build is exactly what makes it powerful. Noroi rewards attention. It trusts the viewer to follow along and draw conclusions. It's one of the most effective examples of horror built entirely through curiosity and unease. Number 1. Session 9, 2001. At the top of this list is a film that proves location alone can be terrifying. Session 9 follows a cleaning crew working inside an abandoned mental hospital. From the first frame, the building feels wrong. What makes this movie unforgettable is atmosphere. The halls echo, rooms feel endless, silence becomes oppressive. The setting isn't dressed up, it's real, and that realism makes every moment heavier. The story unfolds slowly, letting tension seep in through conversations and small changes in behavior. You watch pressure build rather than explode. The fear comes from watching people unravel. When this movie was released, it was often described as slow. That label caused many to miss it, but patience is its greatest strength. Session 9 understands psychological horror better than most. It doesn't chase attention, it waits, and by the time it ends, you realize the fear was always there, quietly watching. That's why it earns the top spot. The 2000s didn't lack great horror. It hit it. Between trends and expectations, these films slipped past audiences who weren't ready to see what they were doing. But time has a way of changing perspective. Which of these deserves a second look for you? Which one did you miss the first time? Share your picks, keep the conversation going, and remember this era had more to offer than history gave it credit for.